The wind came down hard through the jagged canyons east of Sierra Verde, scouring the plains like it meant to erase them. Dust scrawled crooked lines across the horizon, and the sun hung there like a bloodshot eye. Elias Kane rode beneath it, hat pulled low, coat stitched and restitched from decades of hard miles. His gelding, Juniper, limped on a front leg, stone bruise maybe, or worse. Elias didn't speak to the animal, not much anymore. He'd run out of words for things that couldn't answer back. The last town he'd passed through was nothing more than a crossroads with a drunk priest and a dying postmaster. That was 9 days past. He traded the last of his jerky for a bottle of carbolic acid and a quarter-pound of lard. Now the lard was gone, the bottle half empty, and his right leg was starting to stink. Elias had been shot 3 weeks back, not a clean wound, high in the thigh just beneath the muscle. A rancher's son with a twitchy trigger had mistaken him for a cattle thief, and Elias hadn't wasted time correcting him. The boy had screamed when Elias cut him across the cheek with his boot knife, but Elias left him alive. The wound in his own leg pulsed like a second heart now, and the fever came at night like a whispering ghost. He built fires low and quick, just enough to warm the stones and boil his water. Coyotes came close sometimes, watching him with yellow eyes, silent as snowfall. He understood them. They lived by taking what was left behind. He did too. When he found the cabin, it was empty and half collapsed. Just 4 logs standing, roof sagging, nothing but mouse nests and droppings inside. He tied Juniper to a dead stump and limped around the place twice, pistol drawn, no sign of recent use. Just the smell of rot and wild onion from somewhere near the back. He stayed 3 days, dressed the wound, dug a shallow pit for water. On the 4th day, a storm rolled in from the south, black as soot and snarling with thunder. Elias hunkered inside the ruined cabin and laid flat against the dirt, his revolver pressed between his ribs and his palm, a familiar weight. It was during that storm he first saw her. She came out of the rain like a deer fleeing fire, soaked through, barefoot, coat torn at the sleeves. Her hair was black and tangled, her face streaked with blood. She didn't knock. She stepped through the open doorway and dropped to her knees in front of his fire like she'd been running for days. Elias didn't move. He waited, eyes narrowing. His pistol stayed where it was, but his finger found the trigger. She looked up at him slowly. No fear, just that hollow look of someone past the point of caring what happens next. "You're bleeding," he said. She nodded, breathless. "So are you." He let the silence stretch. The rain battered the roof above them like fists against a coffin lid. Her hands were trembling, and there was dirt beneath her nails, smeared with something darker. "Name?" he asked. "Sal," she said, "short for something I don't use no more." She didn't ask for food or shelter, just sat there, dripping, hands in her lap like a child punished at church. When he finally stood, leg throbbing, she didn't flinch. He walked past her to the corner where he kept what was left of his hardtack and jerky, tossed a scrap her way. She caught it. They said nothing more that night. When he woke the next morning, she was gone. And so was his horse. He found her tracks by the creek. She'd ridden Juniper hard, careless. The storm had churned the ground to black sludge, so the prints were easy to follow. His legs screamed with every step. He didn't care. He would kill her when he caught her, or maybe not. He hadn't decided yet. By sundown, he caught up. She stopped at the edge of a ravine, dismounted, and was kneeling beside Juniper, who had fallen. The horse was panting hard, foam at his mouth. A twist of barbed wire lay half buried in the mud, old fencing from some ghost ranch. Juniper had stepped in it. She looked up as Elias approached. No fear still, just that same blank-eyed stare. "I was bringing him back," she said. Elias looked at the leg, torn up raw and pulsing. "He's done," he said. She nodded, "I know." He raised the pistol, not at her, at the horse, pulled the trigger once. The silence after was worse than the thunder had been. He didn't speak to her as they walked back, not once. She followed behind him like a stray. That night, she sat across the fire from him and stitched a rip in her coat with one of his needles. "You could have killed me for what I did," she said. "I might still," he replied. She looked at him then, and for the first time, there was something in her face that wasn't just emptiness. Fair. He slept with the pistol under his arm that night. But she didn't run again. Not that night, not the next. By the third day, they'd spoken 27 words total. He kept track, though he didn't know why. On the fourth, he woke to find her boiling water over the fire. She looked up and said, "You're gonna lose that leg if you don't cut out the rot." He stared at her for a long time, said nothing. She looked away. "I've done it before," she said, "on a man worse off than you." "Who was he?" She shook her head. "No one now." He didn't say yes, he didn't have to. She laid out her tools that night, a heated knife, a bottle of whiskey, a length of old cloth for the tourniquet. When she told him to bite down, he didn't ask questions. He just did. When he woke 3 days later, the fever was gone. But she was still there, still tending the fire, still watching him like he was something unfinished. And for the first time in 10 years, Elias Kane began to wonder if maybe he wasn't supposed to die out there after all. The pain came back in waves, not like before, not hot and sickly, but clean, sharp as the blade that had carved it. Elias lay on the floor for a full day without speaking. When he finally sat up, she handed him a cup of warm creek water and said nothing. He drank. Outside, the weather broke. The clouds scattered, and a cold sun came through like an old sheriff returning to a lawless town. Wind chattered through the broken roof slats. Birds began calling again. She moved through the wreck of the cabin like she'd lived there all her life. She found a tin basin beneath the hearthstones and patched it with wax to carry water. She pulled nails from the crumbling support beam and used them to fasten broken shelves. She cleaned out a squirrel's nest behind the fire pit and used the straw to start new kindling. She made something from nothing with a grim steadiness Elias recognized. They didn't talk about staying, not then, but neither of them left. His leg healed slow, but it healed straight. She cleaned the wound twice a day, tied it with boiled cloth, and once brought him a poultice of green paste that smelled like crushed sage and wild garlic. He asked her what was in it. She said, "What grows near poison?" She never asked where he came from, never asked what he'd done or who he'd buried. He returned the favor. One morning he woke to the sound of her sharpening a knife with a wet stone by the fire. She was humming low, a sad tune. Could have been a hymn, could have been a warning. He watched her for a long while before she noticed. When she did, she just said, "You snore." He grunted, "So leave." She didn't. Later that day, she took his rifle and walked out into the brush. He thought she'd left for good that time. But at dusk, she came back with a brace of rabbits slung over her shoulder and a rusted trap in her hand. "Found this buried in the mud," she said. "Almost stepped in it." He took it from her. The thing was half collapsed, jaws frozen open with rust, but still had teeth enough to break a man's foot if it wanted. She sat across the fire and cleaned the rabbits while he worked the trap open and shut with the back of his knife. She watched him do it. Who leaves traps like that and doesn't come back for them? He met her eyes. The kind of people who stop needing food. After that, they began to range farther. He could walk a mile without help by then. She would scout ahead and leave markers, 3 stones stacked or a strip of red cloth tied to a branch. He followed. Found her crouched once beside a burned wagon, another time perched on a dead oak with her rifle aimed west. "They're coming," she said that second time. Who? She just pointed. Three men on horseback, far off but closing. They watched from the bluff as the men passed below, not talking, not rushing, just riding like they had all the time in the world. One wore a red coat, another had a patch over his eye. The third was bald and carried a long-barreled pistol across his lap like it was a child. "Friends of yours?" Elias asked. She shook her head. "Then how do you know they're coming here?" She didn't answer, just said, "We need to move." That night she showed him a place 2 miles east, under a rock overhang where the wind couldn't find you. There was an old fire pit there too, charcoal long cold. She didn't say how she knew of it. He didn't ask. They slept light. In the morning, he woke to find her gone again. But this time, her rifle was still there. He waited, tended the fire, ate half a rabbit and drank the last of the boiled water. She didn't return that day, or the next. On the third, he left the overhang and walked back to the ruined cabin. Found a trail of boot prints in the ash outside, deep, broad-soled, not hers, 3 sets. He limped inside. The fire had been kicked out, the bedrolls cut open, blood on the wall, not much, a smear, maybe a tooth. He stood there a long time. When he went outside again, he followed the tracks west, through the gullies and the ravines, up toward the ridgeline where the trees grew twisted and the light came down in stripes. The trail was easy. They hadn't tried to hide it. At dusk, he found the camp. Just below the bluff, a single fire, 3 horses, 2 men visible, one drinking from a canteen, the other squatting to skin a snake. She was there too. Tied to a post, barefoot again, face bloodied. He didn't look away, not even when she turned her head and saw him. Her eyes said nothing, just flat as lake water, but her shoulders lifted the smallest amount. That was enough. Elias waited for the sun to go, let the dark settle. Let the men grow lazy with firelight and drink. He moved in slow, quiet, like he'd been taught long ago when he rode for bounty and never gave his name. He slit the throat of the one on watch first. Clean, no cry, the blood spurted hot on his hand. The second man saw too late, tried to draw, but the firelight blinded him. Elias put 2 bullets in his chest. The third man, Pachai, came out of the dark, knife in hand, slashed wild, caught Elias on the arm. They grappled, falling into the dirt. Elias lost the pistol, dug into his belt for the boot knife. The man was stronger, younger maybe, but Elias fought like someone with no after. He stabbed upward, once, twice. Then a third time under the ribs, Pachai went limp. When he stood, he went to her. She was slumped but breathing. Her lip was split, one eye swollen shut. She looked at the blood on him. "Took your time," she muttered. He cut her free. They didn't speak the rest of that night. Not until the fire was dead and the bodies burned and the wind began to rise again across the ridge. Then she said, "They weren't after me." He turned. "They were after you." Elias didn't flinch. "Why?" She shook her head. "They said your name, one of them did, said you left a man dead in Reno, took something that wasn't yours." "I took a horse he drew first." "Was it his?" "No." She smiled, a crooked thing, mean and quiet. "I guess we're both being followed then." He said nothing, just looked at the fire, let it speak for them both. When the sky turned gray again, they packed what little they had left. She walked with a limp now. He carried her rifle. Neither spoke of where they'd go. They just moved east. Together. The prairie burned behind them. Not flame, not smoke, but something quieter, a kind of scouring. The kind that followed death and ash, the kind that made the wind taste like old blood. Elias and Sal rode 2 of the dead men's horses. She took the one with the chipped hoof, said it reminded her of a dog she used to have. He didn't ask what happened to the dog. They moved northeast through land gone dry with hunger. The rivers were brittle lines, and the trees leaned like drunks toward shade that no longer came. They drank rainwater when they could, melted frost from leaves when the nights dipped cold again. She found a cracked compass in the pocket of her coat. He laughed when she showed it to him. "That won't help." "It's not for help," she said. "It's for remembering which way is a way." He didn't ask what from. He knew better by then. By the end of the second week, they reached a valley threaded with black pines and the broken teeth of old mines. She said they should stop, that this place was far from riders and law, and the earth here still held something worth digging. They found a shack near a dried-up shaft. Half of it had collapsed, but the other half was upright enough to sleep in. The roof leaned east and groaned when the wind caught it, but Elias liked the sound. It was honest. They fixed it day by day, patching walls with brush and river mud, filling the cracks with moss. Sal carved new door hinges out of rawhide and nailed the shutter shut with wire from a blown telegraph line. She didn't smile often, but when she got the fireplace to draw without smoking up the whole room, she did, just once. It looked like sunlight falling through iron bars. Weeks passed, the world beyond the valley thinned. No sign of riders, no bullet fire in the distance. They began planting tobacco, onions, beans, things hardy enough to suffer and keep growing. She set traps, brought back ground squirrel and one half-dead hawk she nursed until it flew again. He hunted in the mornings, fixed the roof, fletched arrows. They spoke more, now and then. One night, over coffee black enough to strip varnish, she said, "You ever think of what it'd be like to live before all this?" He looked at her, not answering. She continued, "Before guns, before tracks and mines and men trying to outshoot their ghosts, just plain land, horse, fire, food." Elias sipped. That land never existed. People still cut each other. They just used sharper rocks. She chuckled, first time he'd heard it. "You're probably right. Been wrong plenty, too." He looked into the fire and added, "But you don't survive out here being right, just by being left." She studied him long and slow after that, said nothing, just let the silence crawl over both of them like moss over bone. One morning she brought back a deer, young buck, not 2 years old. Clean shot through the eye. When he skinned it, he found the meat laced with old scars, like the animal had been hunted once before and got away. He said, "Why this one?" She shrugged. He was alone. That night, she told him about the first man she ever killed. She was 14. The man had come through her uncle's homestead looking for whiskey and favors. Her uncle gave him both. The man lingered. One night, Sal took her uncle's cattle brand and pressed it against the man's sleeping face. He screamed himself hoarse. She slit his throat before he finished. Her uncle chased her halfway through the desert before she turned and put a bullet through his horse. "I didn't kill him," she said, "but I let the heat do the rest." Elias didn't speak, just passed her the last strip of deer meat and poured them both a swallow of whiskey. The frost returned early that year, thick and fast, biting the valley clean. They split wood every day and burned it every night. The sky turned white. The creek froze solid. They stayed warm because they learned how not to waste movement. Everything became a pattern: rise, hunt, cook, patch, sleep. When he woke coughing blood one morning, she said nothing, just handed him a rag. He wiped his lips and nodded. It passed. He buried it like everything else. Then came the dog. She found it limping along the trail below the ridgeline, ribs showing like broken fingers, one ear torn clean. He was mangy, scarred, and quiet as smoke. Elias said they should put it down. Sal said no, he's already been down. They named him Fault. He stayed close to Sal and circled Elias like something untrusting but curious. Within a week, he followed her everywhere. At night, he slept by the fire with his nose to the door. One night, Fault didn't bark. He howled. They both woke. Elias took the rifle, Sal the knife. The dog stood by the door, unmoving, his hackles raised. The fire had gone out. Then came the knock. Once slow. Then again. A third time. Sal's voice was tight. That's no lost rider. Elias moved to the window. No moon, no light, just the shape of someone tall, still. Name yourself, Elias called. No answer. Then the voice came. You took something from my brother. Sal moved to the back wall, whispered, which one? Elias said, what brother? The voice outside replied, the one with the patch, the one who rode with Mercer. Sal closed her eyes. Mercer's men don't let things go. Neither do I, said Elias. He opened the door fast, shot once, empty. No one there. Not a sound. Then from the trees, laughter, cold, dry. He turned to Sal. We leave before sunrise. She nodded, but the sound of that laugh stayed with them. They packed what they could, burned the rest. Before they left, Elias stood outside and looked at the valley. Snow falling, smoke trailing like thread from the chimney. I could have stayed, he muttered. Sal beside him quiet, then so could I. They rode east again, Fault at their heels. The wilds didn't change, but they did. Each mile pulled tighter, and behind them something followed. The land beyond the valley twisted. It flattened into gray plateaus and blackened soil, where nothing grew taller than a man's knee, and even the crows circled high, reluctant to come down. Elias knew these stretches, dead borderlands, territory no map claimed and no law dared ride through. The kind of place where wrong men vanished and worse ones were born. They traveled at dusk and slept by day beneath broken wagon hulls or inside dry creeks. Sal spoke less the farther they rode, as if the air here didn't deserve words. Elias understood. This was country carved by knives and ruin, not names. On the third day they found a town, or what had once tried to be one. 5 buildings, each rotted near through, and a chapel sunken into its own foundation like a drunk in prayer. The sign out front read, Marlowe, in paint that had cracked and faded into unreadable streaks. They tied the horses behind what had been a livery. Fault sniffed every doorway and refused to step inside the chapel. That was enough for Sal. They made camp in the shell of the old general store, its shelves bare but its walls thick. That night, Sal took out a folded map. Elias leaned closer. She pointed at a place west of a river bend, marked with a red thumbprint. Unsafe. She shook her head. Not safe, but hidden. Whose mark? Mine. He looked at her a long moment. She didn't flinch. I went there once, long ago, when I still believed in turning myself in. He raised a brow. Why didn't you? She looked down at the map. They wouldn't have taken me alive. Morning brought wind, fast and mean. Dust like powdered rust swept over the town. They wrapped their faces and pressed on, eyes low, ears sharp. Fault kept close, his head always angled behind them. Twice he growled at nothing. They crossed a dried riverbed lined with the bones of cattle. At the far end stood a linta with a rusted stovepipe still poking toward the sky. Sal said nothing, but her hand went to the knife at her hip. That night they made a fire in the hollow of an old tree and stayed awake in shifts. The wind carried strange sounds, metal creaking, boots dragging, a voice muttering in some language Elias didn't know. Traders, Sal whispered. No trader wanders these parts, Elias replied. In the morning they found tracks, 6 horses, 2 wagons, not fresh but not old either. Wagons meant cargo, cargo meant men, men meant risk. Still they followed. By dusk they crested a ridge and saw smoke, not camp smoke, chimney smoke, proper, steady. A settlement tucked into a narrow gulch, walled on both sides by red rock, one road in, none out. Zal stared. New. No, Elias said. Old, just buried deep. They hid the horses under netted branches and went in on foot. Fault followed without a sound. It wasn't a town so much as a compound, 15 buildings arranged in a circle. Children played in the dust while women stirred pots over fires. Men sat with rifles laid across their knees, watching everything, not militia, not army. Miners, Sal said, but not for ore. He nodded, opium maybe, or guns. The kind of place that didn't tolerate strangers, the kind that made strangers vanish. They didn't stay long, just circled the edge and left before the sun dipped far enough to cast long shadows. Back at the ridge, Elias said, "You've been here before." "Once." "What happened?" "Someone offered me a place. I declined." "Why?" "They wanted a piece of me." She didn't explain further, didn't have to. They rode south from the gulch, taking a narrow path that wound between cliffs like the throat of a blade. Fault grew restless. Then came the smell, acrid, like old copper and soot. Elias stopped. Burnt earth, the black char of rifle powder. He dismounted, walked ahead with his rifle low. Around the bend, he found the wagon. Split in two, one wheel gone, the other still turning slightly. A child's doll lay in the dirt nearby, its face melted from flame. 6 bodies sprawled in the gravel, 2 men, a woman, and 3 small shapes. Sal stepped beside him, said nothing, just knelt. Bootprints heavy, broad, sharp-toed. Elias bent down, touched the nearest one, still warm. Less than an hour. She stood, face stone flat. He looked at her. "I think Mercer's men want more than me now." She nodded once. "We end it." They backtracked north, no trail this time, just instinct. Fault found the scent first and took off at a sprint. They followed. Gunmetal dusk gathered on the ridges above. By the time they caught up, the men were camped in a narrow vale, fire crackling bright and stupid. 4 of them, all armed, laughing. Sal turned to Elias. Her face was calm. "Take the left." He shook his head. "I take them all, you cover the fire." She opened her mouth, then closed it. He didn't wait, just moved. The first man died with Elias' knife in his chest before he stood from the fire. The second turned and got a shot off, too high. Elias shot him through the mouth. The third ducked behind a rock. Sal shot him in the back of the knee, then walked up and slit his throat as he screamed. The last man tried to run. Fault took him down. Elias stood in the smoke, chest heaving, eyes bright. "Not Mercer," Sal said. "Not yet." "No," Elias replied, "but close." They burned the camp, buried the dead. Sal found a letter in one man's coat pocket. She read it in silence, then tossed it into the flames. "What did it say?" Elias asked. "That Mercer's heading east." "Why?" She didn't answer right away. "Then he's looking for someone." Elias waited. She looked at him, "Not you." "Then who?" She looked toward the fire, where the letter turned to ash. "Me." They crossed into canyon country just after first frost. The land grew crueler there, less tethered to reason. Ravines split underfoot without warning. The rocks bled red when it rained, and the silence bore weight, like the bones of old massacres sunk into the dust. Every echo felt like it came from something waiting, not something past. Elias rode with one hand always on the rifle. Sal stopped sleeping full nights. Fault ran tighter circles, ears flat, hackles stiff. The dog knew what was coming. So did Elias. The trail no longer curved, it narrowed. Mercer. They didn't speak his name often. He was the kind of man spoken about in lowered tones or not at all. Elias had crossed him once in the Utah Salt Country, long before he met Sal. Back then, Mercer ran guns out of an old Mormon fort turned slaughterhouse, charged tax on every bullet, left behind the ones who couldn't pay. Elias didn't remember the name of the woman Mercer hanged for a pocketknife, but he remembered her child, silent, starving, watching it happen. That was the first time Elias put a bullet through a man without a bounty. Now Mercer was looking for Sal. Why, Elias couldn't yet see, but Sal knew, and she wasn't ready to say. They followed riverbeds and cliffs until they found the old railway. The tracks were dead, steel rusted and buckled, blackened with soot from an explosion long forgotten. Half a train still lay on its side, roof peeled back like a sardine tin. Sal said it had been ambushed years ago, Confederate gold or dynamite or just retribution. No one ever knew. The bodies were gone, but the bones remained. They camped beneath the wreck. That night, Sal carved lines into a bit of birch bark with her knife, one for each man who had chased them, one thicker, deeper than the rest. Mercer. She nodded. Why does he want you? She didn't answer at first, just stared at the fire. Then, I killed his son. Elias waited. He was 19, didn't act it. Thought because he had Mercer's name, he could take what he wanted. Her voice didn't shake, didn't rise, just cut clean. He took a girl from the mining camp, one of mine. Elias didn't ask what she meant by mine, didn't need to. I followed him 3 days, found him drunk, half naked, bragging to some bootlicker about what he'd done. I shot him in the spine, let him crawl a bit, then I cut his throat. She looked up at Elias. Mercer sent men after me. I killed those 2. Then I ran, kept running. Elias nodded once. Then we stopped running. They scouted north, took 2 days to find the trailhead, an old Ute path winding between cliffs, marked with antlers and rock towers. Elias read the land like scripture, found signs of horses, campfires, drag marks. Mercer's caravan had passed through only days earlier. Heavy traffic, too many for a fight in the open. Sal studied the map again, found a pinch in the trail near the top of the ridge. One way through, she pointed. There. They climbed by night, taking the narrow ledge one step at a time, packs strapped tight, rifle barrels wrapped to keep from glinting. Fault led, silent but tense, every step a calculation. By dawn, they reached the pass. Wind ripped over the rocks, cruel and thin. Below them stretched a valley blanketed in black pines and mist, the edges swallowed in fog. At the base, flickering campfires, dozens. Mercer was down there. They waited 2 days. Watched patrols, counted guards, mapped rhythms. Elias slept in short bursts. Sal didn't sleep at all. On the 3rd day, a wagon rolled in, heavily guarded. In its bed, crates marked with the symbol of the federal mint. Elias turned to her. You were right, Gold. She nodded. They move in the morning. That night, they laid the charges. Sal had taken dynamite from the half-wrecked train, carefully, with reverence. Each stick was older than most graves. Elias built the fuse from stolen wire and kerosene-soaked cloth. They buried the charges under the trail's narrowest point, covered them with rock and dust. Sal looked down at the camp one last time. Elias asked, You sure? She looked at him. No, but I'm done being chased. He lit the fuse. The explosion tore the cliffside like thunder cracking the ribs of the world. The sound rolled for miles, trees splintered, dust rose like judgment. The convoy below scattered. Elias and Sal moved. Down the slope like ghosts, through smoke and gunfire and screaming horses. Elias shot clean, 2 at a time. Sal flanked left, knifing throats, her eyes hard and still. Then came Mercer. He stood beside the wagon, coat flared, rifle in hand. His beard was streaked white, his eyes small and cruel. He saw Sal and smiled. "Little thief," he said. "You taught me," she replied. They fired at the same time. His bullet grazed her shoulder. Hers went through his mouth. He dropped, twitched, stilled. Elias limped to her side. Fault came next, muzzle bloodied. Sal stood over Mercer's body, looked down. "He thought I'd beg," she said. Elias didn't speak. She crouched, took Mercer's ring from his hand, turned it once in her fingers, then tossed it into the fire. They walked away at dawn. The sun broke slow, cutting through the smoke like a blade through hide. Behind them, the dead smoldered. Ahead, only open land. They didn't look back. They headed east, not speaking for the first 3 days. Not from grief, not from fear, just quiet. As if the blood they'd spilled had filled the air between them and nothing needed saying. Mercer was dead, the men were dead, the wagons burned, the past had no more teeth. But memory lingers even when the danger's gone, especially then. They moved slow through the open, where the grass grew in thin patches and the sky felt too wide. Fault limped for a day and refused food the next. On the 4th morning, he stood by the creek with his ears pricked and his head low, staring across the water. Sal stood beside him. "What's he see?" Elias asked. "Nothing," she said. "He's looking for ghosts." They stopped in a place that wasn't on her map. A flat hill, ringed with cedar and shaded on 3 sides. A creek curled nearby, cold and fast. The soil was dark. The wind didn't scream there. Sal knelt and touched the earth. "Good ground," she said. "For hiding. For planting." They built again, not a cabin, something smaller. Something they didn't name. 4 posts, a roof of willow, walls woven tight with brush. Sal found a tin mirror in a wagon wreck and nailed it to the inside wall. Elias carved a table from cedar root. They set stones in a circle around the fire pit and left space between them for others, though none would come. Sal planted beans and a single line of corn. She carved a small mark into each seed before it went into the ground. "What's that for?" Elias asked. "So they know someone meant them." He built a fence, not to keep things out, just to draw a line, a boundary, a shape to say this far and no farther. One morning, Sal didn't come back from the creek. He found her kneeling beside the water, staring at the reflection. "She looked like me," she said. "Who?" "The girl I told you about, the one Mercer's son took." Elias sat beside her, waited. "I remember her hair. She kept braiding it even after he hurt her, as if that made her whole again." Sal didn't cry, just stared. "I braid mine now," she said, and ran her fingers through the black strands, "because it didn't make her whole." She dropped a small strip of cloth into the stream. It was blood-stained, from Mercer's coat. The water took it. In early spring they heard horses. Not many, 3, maybe 4, riders on the far ridge. They didn't come down, just paused, looked, then turned away. Elias and Sal watched them go. "No one's chasing," Elias said. "Not anymore," Sal replied. By midsummer, Fault had gone blind in one eye. He no longer chased birds. He slept at the foot of the bedroll, growling in his dreams. That fall, Elias caught a fever, nothing like the old one, just chills, a cough, a weight in the bones. Sal boiled pine needles and made broth. When he woke sweating through the furs, she was there with a cloth on his forehead. "I thought you'd gone," he said. She didn't smile. "I did, came back." "Why?" She stood and poured more broth. "Because there's nothing left out there." He drank. That winter the snow fell heavy, blanketing the world in silence. They carved a narrow trail to the creek, took turns breaking it open after storms. Sal sewed him a coat from the skins of rabbits she'd caught. He carved her a comb from antler. Neither said it aloud. Spring came late. When the ground thawed, they walked to the ridge together, where the sky bent low and the wind didn't feel sharp anymore. The valley stretched below them, quiet, untouched. Elias held a small leather pouch in his hands. Inside, 3 bullets, 2 coins, and a tooth, the last things he'd kept from the road. He buried them beneath the cedar tree. "What now?" Sal asked. He looked at her. "We live," he said. They stood a while longer, watching the birds spiral above the creek, the light catching their wings like glass. Then they turned back, walked down the hill, together. No one followed, nothing burned. And in the wilds, the wind carried no names.